right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo. Excited to be here once again. And surely what's going to be a great show. And as you can see, we got three of us that are going to be starting from the beginning right here. Of course, myself, Brick CBK, joined as always by BSJ. Got a third co-host, I guess you could call him, on this show to help us out with some discussion. My good friend Elevated over there from Dota Alchemy. Elevated, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm good.
I'm just dandy. I back home. I was in New York for a while, so just got a little homesick. So it's nice to be back in my own place for a little while. And yeah,
Yeah, I
ready
know.
to talk about some dotes.
Yeah, we definitely have plenty to talk about. Of course, last week's show it was a little bit, I don't want to say awkward, but it happened. It was major qualifiers were still wrapping up, so we got some discussion in there. But the rest of the results we definitely plan to talk about, as well as the minor qualifiers and what came of that as well. But figured again we'd have Elevated on joining us, not only because he's a good-looking guy himself, after all, but he also happened to cast a fair amount of the matches. I believe you were mainly focused on the NA region, right?
Actually, for the major, I was lucky enough to do the EU.
You're EU,
region.
that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I even had Group B, so I had like the crazy one with Alliance and Liquid and OG and all that. So I was pretty blessed with those casts, and then I did a little bit of the minor, which was mostly NA.
Awesome. Well, excited to have you on. So thank you, of course, for joining us here on the show. All right. So as mentioned, though, we definitely have some stuff to talk about, and I figured we'd start strong here in the sense of, remember last week's show, I guess more so BSJ, when we're sitting here talking about, man, well, LGD, they're gonna qualify this time, right? It's not gonna. It happened again. LGD, unfortunately, not getting out of the open qualifiers, and think it makes sense just to start with that as, of course, the big storyline of these of the major results, especially that we still have to discuss. Of course, the China qualifiers themselves starting a little bit later than the others due to what's going on over there, but they did indeed happen, and we do have the ultimate results. But usually we'd be talking about the winners of the event, but in this case, not so much. LGD not getting out of opens, losing to a team this time in a best out of three, a team called Blaze, actually, which has one of the top female Dota players we came to found. Axe, I believe, was her name. AXX, an offlane player that definitely has some impressive playmaking skills, and really cool storyline there. But that's another thing to discuss later on, perhaps. But man, focusing on LGD, they made the roster change. We talked about it with Ajit joining the roster in place of Ame, which in itself is like, okay, a week before, whatever. They then bailed on Ajit the day before the qualifiers and went with another core instead. I'm blanking on the name right now on who it was, but
ASD.
ASD, that's right.
Used to play for eHome.
Yeah,
I believe, yeah.
So just to get through the story right here, then I'll let you guys get into the discussion. But they replaced with ASD the day before. They go to the open qualifiers, and then sure enough, they lose in the best of three, what was the deciding match to get to the closed qualifiers. So LGD, once again, not competing in even the closed qualifiers of the major or the minor. Quite the hiccup right there. So Elevated, we'll start with you. You're our guest after all on the show. Overall thoughts on this whole LGD situation and what took place, and really the shame of getting eliminated.
I mean, I don't know if you can call it a hiccup at this point. It seems to be getting towards where you might be able to refer to it as a trend. I was actually a little bit worried when they lost that crazy series to OG back at TI8, and then they stuck together, and they looked pretty good the following season, even through TI9, but they didn't really have like the same kind of magical dominance that they'd showed in TI8, and I never thought that they looked quite as sharp. And the switch of taking out Ame, I think, was probably a step in the right direction, just because, well, he's obviously an amazing player. He's always top of the leaderboard. I never really felt like he was one of those carry players that you could just like put your faith in. He's my carry. If we just give him a game, he's gonna win the game. Like you feel that way about somebody like a Miracle or Nisha from last year. It's like, if we just get this guy to a certain point, he's gonna win the game for us. And I always felt like Ame was one of those guys where it would happen that way, but it almost felt like he was more prone to throwing the game than actually finishing it, and he was a win more player than a like win from behind player, in my opinion. So, you know, I don't want to take too much away from him as a player because obviously he is very skilled, but I just think that like the carry pool in China is extremely shallow right now, at least at the top level. You've got like Monet, you've got I wouldn't even consider IG's carry necessarily like a a tier 1 carry. As weird as that sounds, it feels like that team is carried more by like the other players than the carry, and that could just be an aspect of the meta that we're in right now. BSJ might have a bit more of better insight on that, but the Chinese carries, I haven't been overtly impressed by them like I have with some of the Western ones lately.
I mean, in terms of the meta, briefly, I'll say I think it's the carry's job to carry this patch. Like, I think the safe lane much favors the carry compared to what it used to be. Teams are much more prioritizing,
Yeah, I agree.
like tri lanes or whatever it takes to give. They're pretty much going for offlaners that don't get railed and safe laners that just freeform. Like, that's pretty much what is the meta right now. So, I'd say the carry role is pretty important right now to deciding whether or not a team is successful. And I think the fact that they are changing out their carry is making that impression right now on their results. But I also think, China is similar to Europe, where the big difference between those regions and something like NA is really the 5th to the 15th best teams in the region. In NA, it's a freaking joke, and these regions, it's not. And so you have to remain at the top of your game to consistently beat these teams. And there's clearly a lot of factors we've already mentioned that are just preventing them from doing just that. And, last year, we saw OG not even make it to, they had to make like top 6 in the last major to even qualify for TI. And we're missing out on a lot of majors just because, I mean, they had like 1 or 2 differences. Like they were missing Ana and I think temporarily someone else at some point. And I say constantly that teams are dictated by their weakest player, not their strongest. And so teams that are changing one player, I don't think the average player can comprehend how big of a difference that can potentially have on a team's ability to perform. So it obviously is a bit shocking at this point, but at the same time, I think riding a ship in Dota is very difficult. So the fact that they failed to qualify already before this one and now it's happened again isn't it's almost like when I grew up and I learned at basketball that if you injure one of your knees, the average player is 300% more likely to injure their other knee as well sometime in their career. It's like if you didn't qualify once, it's almost more likely they're not going to qualify again than it would have been if they had always qualified, that kind of thing. I think it's more likely to happen again than it is to happen the first time.
Once they break like that, like the invincibility, because I feel like LGD has just been kind of like the invincible Chinese team for the last 2 years. Like, of course they're seed 1, of course they're qualifying for every LAN. All of a sudden they don't. All of a sudden they can't beat these teams, and it's just like, wait a second, are we actually as good as we think we are? And that kind of happens to players individually as well. I mean, who knows what these players are thinking at this point? FY has been to the pinnacle almost several times now and never quite been able to do it. Maybe as well. Chalice and Xnova are a little bit less experienced, but again, it's like you get so close and then you don't make it. It's kind of like the Virtus Pro that we saw. They're like this amazing team on LAN, and then they just get to TI, and then they just look awful over and over and over again. And you have to believe like it just comes to mentality at some point because, they switched out Ame. They got essentially the same result. So was Ame the problem? Probably not. Was Ajit the problem? Probably not. Was ASD the problem? Probably not. It's got to be something else. It's got to be like the team chemistry, the drafting, the coaching. I haven't had enough chance to go back and look at their open qualifier games to see how they look, but I think we're seeing this kind of across regions now where, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but Nigma, a lot of these high-level teams, a lot of these high-level players are starting to show a little bit of weakness because it's really, really difficult to stay on top in Dota for an extended period of time.
Real quickly before we continue on, BSJ, I think your webcam mic is being used.
Is
really,
it crap
yeah.
quality right now? God,
Yeah.
I hate how it does that.
We could understand you, but it is clearly
Not good.
the
I
right
see.
mic. So yeah, but yeah. So
Uh,
to continue on the conversation, but there really is a couple of things to look at. I feel like with this whole LGD situation, it's not only the idea that does something else need to change, and I think that's certainly still a standing argument as you're bringing up. But my biggest issue with this was not the idea that something needed to change. As good of a player Ami was, I'm fine with them trying somebody new. But they've had so much time. They've had a lot of time here not qualifying for the last cycle of events on top of obviously taking the quote-unquote break from the first cycle. Why did they just suddenly a week before these qualifiers decide, okay, let's change our carry player, and then to make it even 10 times worse, change it the day before after I heard rumors that apparently they lost like 19 of 20 scrims or something like that with Ajit, and that's why they made the last minute change. But be it that the case or not, they had so much time before that to figure this out, in my opinion. So the timing of the change is what I'm most concerned about when it comes to the team. Again, we don't necessarily know the ultimate reason, probably never will in the end, but I really think for such a high-tier organization such as LGD, with the backing of somebody like PSG especially, and the recent success that they've had these last couple of years, that to me came off the most like, what are you guys doing? So when I saw them lost in the open qualifiers, just like everyone else, it was shocking. But at the same time, it's almost not, because it goes back to the points that you guys are both bringing up. I mean, this is an ever-evolving game. Dota 2 is. There's no secret there. And we did just have a bigger patch recently. So, you know, what have you done for me lately is the tagline that is constantly used, and I think for good reason. So LGD right now is clearly there is something going on. You know, will they stick with this roster? Maybe. We'll see. But I think you have to just, now they once again have this break. If they're gonna make more changes, they have to do it now or in the next couple of weeks, not wait till the last minute once again before the said qualifiers start. So, you know,
Can I ask, is my mic better?
yes,
yeah.
it's a lot better now.
Okay, can I be very clear about
Okay.
how much I hate technology? Brief rant. I went into my mic settings and it said this mic. All I did was go to the scroll down menu and select what was already shown
And then
to
it
be
switched.
selected, and it switched. I hate like
Discord,
streaming issues
man.
when people are like, you know, your mic's bad, or, you know, donations are off. I'm like, I didn't touch a thing, and
Don't
I'll
you
just
love that?
like it literally says my donations are on, and I'll just go off on, and it works. I'm like, what? You know, whatever.
It's just like plugging in a USB cable into something. You go to plug it in, it doesn't work. You turn it upside down, you plug it in the other way, and that doesn't work. And you're like, wait a second. You turn it back the other way, and it's like, oh, now it works. Like, what?
Yeah.
How? Why? This doesn't make sense.
I know I'm like detracting from the LGD conversation, but holy moly, I'm like, if it had said my webcam mic, I'd be like, okay, I get it. My computer like automatically swapped to the webcam mic or whatever. But like,
Yeah.
it actually said this mic, so whatever. That's
right,
my rant.
pro
but,
gamer,
okay,
by the
move
way.
on.
Here we go. We'll segue back in. Now LGD will just trade because they're both CDEC and LGD are both technically under the same ownership. So they're just going to bring Ame back in, plug him back in. Boom, all of a sudden, major qualification in cycle number 4.
It's
There
bold
you go.
predictions there. That's you know
I
what?
mean, I don't doubt something like that. I mean, you talk about how long they have to prepare. Like, I can just say that in Dota, man, I think the hardest part about Dota is when something's wrong. It's just like a tech problem, actually. It's like you have to just theory craft what is wrong, and it's trial and error. Like, there's so much that can go wrong in Dota that when you're not winning, identifying the problem is so difficult that sometimes it just doesn't work. Like, you are trying things, and like sometimes the pieces just all come together and it works almost immediately. It really is a lot like technology, after my rant of, you know, annoyingness of technology, where sometimes it gets an instant fix and sometimes you spend weeks just searching and you can't find it. And I really do believe that about Dota. And so it's kind of like, I hear your perspective of like, God, they've had a long time, and it's like, I agree with you, but at the same time, you know, going back to my statistics lesson in college, this will be my Nahaz bit here. That I remember learning about a theorem. I don't remember what it was called, but there's a theorem that once you buy something like technology based, that if it works 3 years from now, every day it's equally likely to break. So like if it's lasted 3 years without breaking, it's just as likely to break on that day that it's 3 years old than it is to have broken on the first day you got it. And so it's like a team is equally likely every day to fix their problem. It's just a matter of how long it takes to finally figure out what went wrong. Like that's how I view Dota. Like for me as a player, there's some times where like something feels off to me and I'm not winning my pubs, I'm not being successful. And I'll be like, I think it's this. And then like 2 days later, everything's back on track. But then sometimes I go through slumps where a month or too long, I just keep losing. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I just can't figure it out. And I just think that really does apply with these teams, that it's just really no surprise that there's teams with heavy momentum. And like Elevated said, that, if you're the king and you remain that way, it's like if everything's going right, all you have to do is keep doing the same thing. That's not exactly, that's much easier to do than it is to change things and figure out what's wrong. And when I look at these LG teams, it's just like, you can tell, man, they're scrambling to figure out what the hell's wrong. But I just think Dota is way too complicated of a dynamic on a team to ever have a formulaic way to fix a problem.
There's no right answer.
There is no like read a book, find the right answer kind of thing. Every team's going to have a different right answer, and it's found almost by hard work combined with luck, where you just stumble upon the right answer after working hard enough to find it.
But like, there's steps you can take though to help you get towards the right answer, or whatever you want to say, however you want to.
And sometimes they're not doing that either. And that, like you said, behind the scenes, there could be all types of things where maybe the organization or the players mentally, kind of, Elevator talked about, maybe these players are not mentally in the right place to do what it takes to right a sinking ship, right? Like that could be the problem as well. And that's why, as these, in this podcast and talking about it, it's what is surprising to me about you is that you're surprised that they had this long and they didn't fix it. I'm like, I just am so skeptical of the ability to fix problems in Dota that if a team is continuously having problems, I kind of just go, well, I can only imagine what is happening within the team. So it's like, for me, it's no surprise when teams go through extended struggles.
I would almost put a countdown clock on how long it takes for them to like blow up the roster at this point.
Yeah.
There's two cycles left, so they still have time, but you'd figure, they have to qualify for the next cycle, right? Like they can't just not qualify for the next cycle and still act like that things are okay. So I guess, to your point,
I'd say the last cycle, or the next cycle, will be the straw that broke the camel's back, or whatever you call it, where if they don't qualify, they're done. It might even be before that, but
this could have been it for all we know. And maybe that clock is up already and stuff's going on behind the scenes. But it's China Dota scene, especially player changes certainly happen, and kind of out of nowhere it feels like sometimes with the transactions almost of the players. We talked about that on last week's show when they first made the change with Ajit. So there are bound to be potential changes out there, but we'll wait and see for LGD. But I think we cover that topic enough here. It's just it is crazy seeing the downfall in that sense, but hopefully for their sake that they can figure it out. But the one last thing, I guess, kind of a transition and talking about now the China qualifiers and how they finished up here. Let's not forget, this is Vici Gaming took a break. They were not in these China qualifiers, so yet another compounding reason as to where, man, it really sucks that LGD did not qualify, at least give themselves a chance, knowing that one of the top teams in the world wasn't even playing in their close qualifiers there. So that's the case, though. Speaking of that, the three teams that did end up qualifying, you had Invictus Gaming, Royal Never Give Up, and eHome were the three teams that ultimately took home the title right there. Aster coming up just short as they lost to both Invictus Gaming and eHome in the quote-unquote playoff stage there themselves. So the three teams that going on again, Vici Gaming not participating, but those were the three, IG, RNG, and eHome. So you guys' thoughts on the China teams that did end up qualifying there? BSJ, start with you.
I'll just say IG, VG seem like the dominant teams. So other than those two, obviously VG not playing and IG qualifying, I think the other components, like the 3 to 7th teams have been pretty consistent, so it's not really surprising. Like EOM, RNG have both been consistently either going to the minor or major, so or at least being very close to the minor, and so that puts them in my top 7 or 8. And I think I've emphasized that my view of China is that the top 8 teams are all contenders. There's just the 2 dominant teams, and since one of them's out, it's just a matter of what other 2 do qualify.
Elevated?
No major surprise there.
I tend to agree. It really has been RNG and eHome is like that. They're like the shelf right below being able to go to the major every single time, and I think that they're both, consistently. eHome's like consistently inconsistent. They're good at times where they could take a game off of Vichy, but they don't seem to be able to like put these drafts together on a regular basis that are top tier. RNG, I think they looked really good at the last minor. Obviously, they got to the grand finals and lost to Nigma, but that shows that they're a pretty close to top tier team. And so without Vichy there, it makes sense that they make it. I did want to say, though, that if you look at the rest of the teams in the Chinese region, it's insane that you have like 4 other teams with essentially full rosters of people without Wikipedia profiles or Liquipedia profiles. And it's just like, who are these guys? How do they have so much talent to bring up through the region? Where is this in the other regions in Dota? But it's cool to see as well, because there's just so much like new blood at least coming into their scene.
Yeah, for such a dominant scene specifically, I definitely agree with you there. And it goes back to Blaze, in fact, being one of those teams. Now, they ended up getting last place in their group. Again, no surprise there. They came for the open qualifiers. But, again, Axe, a female player, and definitely a cool storyline to follow there. But we'll see if we see them more in the future themselves. But, yeah, Aven Girls, I guess you pronounce it, Look for Smile, a couple of these other teams that, yeah, haven't heard of before. No profiles, don't really know much about them, but certainly cool to see that new blood. But kind of going back to BSJ's point as well, when it comes to the major, this does feel like one of the first big-time tournaments where the China representation in general just is a bit underwhelming. And, obviously VG Gaming sitting out definitely has a part to do with that. Of course, there's the fact that LGD didn't even qualify for the qualifiers. But yeah, other than IG, I don't personally see a team like RNG or eHome going the distance or doing too well at the major itself. Certainly a roster is there to potentially do well, but again, the overall picture, it just something about it feels like it is underwhelming in the big picture when it comes to the representation that we're used to seeing at these bigger events out of China. So all right, those are the 3 teams, though. Moving on here. Another fun storyline to follow, of course, well, the European region. Elevated, you mentioned this is a region that you happen to get the chance to cast bits and pieces of it. We got the 2 teams that qualified initially. No shockers there, and that Secret and OG were actually the first 2 teams. I believe we talked about in the last week's show even. But maybe a little surprising. I'm going to admit, I'll be the first one to say, very surprising to me. But NIP, the 3rd team, ultimately qualifying for the European region. Of course, making those roster changes before the event. Hawk joining as a new core player. Lelis as well on the roster out of Brazil, coming over to the European region. Clearly, it clicked, though. It clicked pretty quickly, and not even arguably, the toughest region when it comes to these qualifiers, I think it's safe to say. And they end up getting that 3rd and final spot to the major. So our boys Ninjas in Pajamas. BSJ, what's your thoughts there?
I mean, nobody ever doubted Universe and PPD as players. So the fact that the beginning of the season they were trying with 3 players and they've at this point kicked all 3. I mean, Biver even qualified. I mean, not to spoil for later portions, but he qualified playing for Chaos in the NA region. So clearly that team has good players. It just boiled down to lack of good chemistry or whatever. I heard that there were personality problems between them and Skeeter initially, and then I don't think Gunner's a carry player. That's my personal opinion on him. And I sometimes I find myself just being incredibly redundant, but I judge teams based on their weakest link, and if you have one weak link, that can make all the difference. So if they replace those weak links, that's good enough for me to believe in a captain like PPD. Like, clearly he's a capable captain. He's proved it year and year again, even if last year, for instance, he wasn't all that successful, as well as the year before with Optic. Like, he still made TI. It's not like those were failure years.
Yeah.
So I also think Alliance and Liquid fall into my category of very solid teams that are not unbeatable. And so if a team assembles itself, they're quite beatable. And I think when it comes to Europe and China, here I go saying the same shit again. The quality of teams that are 3rd to 8th is very high. So for teams like Alliance and Liquid and Nigma to not make it to the major is just not that surprising to me at all. And I don't even view those teams like lowly because they didn't make it. I think Secret's the only reliably good enough team that I think will always make it. And then you obviously add OG back to the mix, who are freaking insane. At that point, like as long as OG performs the way we expect them to, I think you're vying for 4 pretty damn good teams to get a 3rd slot. One of them's going to get it.
You're saying EU might need more slots.
I mean, I said that last week too. Like look at the.
I agree.
Look at the teams in North America that didn't make the cut, and then we look at the teams in EU that didn't make the cut. There's a slight difference in the quality.
Zolotl, Liquid, I mean, kind of the same.
It's a wish-wash, It's understandable that it's close, and Valve. It's a judgment call.
All right, yeah, we've definitely done that discussion before, though. Elevated, your thoughts on NIP?
Before I get into it, I just want to say thank you, BSJ, for last week calling out the NA region because, let's be honest, it's garbage. It's probably the worst region in all of Dota at this point.
It's embarrassing.
Like the competitiveness, it's not good. It's really bad. But anyway, we'll go on to our other NA team, which is Ninjas in Pajamas, and I actually. I saw them. I think they were the first series that I cast. One of the two. They're the first time that I got to see the new OG play.
Okay.
And OG smashed Alliance. So it was the second series that I cast of OG. OG smashed Alliance, and then NIP played against them, and they smashed NIP in game 1. And then they tried to do the exact same thing in game 2, where it was just like this. OG style. They're like diving your tier 3 at 12 minutes, and people just don't seem to be able to not play OG's game. But I saw NIP play OG's game for about 15 minutes, and then there was like this very distinct shift where all of a sudden they were just like completely pulling OG apart. They almost started to come back into the game. And I could see that PPD's captaining and just like the discipline of the players and trusting the calls was there. And at that point, I knew that they were going to be pretty good in the qualifiers. And I think that the additions of Dahak and Lelis in particular are really big deals for them because we saw Lelis essentially carry Beast Coast at the last major. And we've seen Dahak have extremely good performances back on Gambit. So now, and I actually can't take anything away from Tanner either. Like he carried Viking GG last qualifiers and beat several good teams, mostly off the back of his good play and decision making. So I think that PPD now has three cores, all of which are hungry because none of them have ever won anything like significant, really significant, that is. And they are all players that you could potentially put the fate of the game in and trust them to do their job. And I don't think that they had that with their previous iteration of the roster. So I'm really excited to see what Ninjas in Pajamas evolves into as the season goes on. And I think that they have the potential to vie for like that second or third spot in Europe. Obviously, I would say Team Secret and OG looked miles above everybody else in the qualifier, but I don't think that NIP is as far behind as a lot of people think they are.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm personally on that bandwagon yet of believing that NIP is now arguably even the third best team in the European region. I don't expect this to translate into the major, and my biggest logic for that is, one, they're still a newer roster together. I do like your point about hungry core players that maybe haven't had the most success themselves individually, but all coming together on a great leadership. Sure, that is a formula for a very, very good team. But I mean, I do look at the journey they took, and yes, even though they might have had a good game against OG, they still lost that series 2-0. They didn't have any very overwhelming, impressive victories other than the Alliance series, in my opinion. They did play Alliance in the group stages. They did 2-0 them. And, of course, Alliance is a very, very solid team themselves. They did then beat Liquid in a best-of-1 tiebreaker match to then get to the playoff stage. So, yes, they deserved it. I'm not calling it a fluke by any means, but I'm also looking at the results and where they were had. And not going to go overboard just yet in terms of, okay, this to me is truly the third best team in the European region. Certainly, though, the roster does speak for it being a good one down the line. But yeah, I guess that's my ultimate point right there. Again, the fact that they all had to defeat a team in aggressive mode to get to the actual major, that's more credit to aggressive mode, frankly, than anything. But
credit to the seeding of this tournament and the grouping.
Yeah. I guess there's that part of it too, I suppose. Yeah.
Group A, like, what is this compared to Group B? I was baffled when I saw these two groups come out.
True. I mean, again, to the credit, you're dealing with I think a lot of it comes back to NIPT, and that's been very disappointing the first two cycles, and that's why they were part of that Group B. But obviously, in hindsight, yeah, it does seem like it was a pretty overpowered Group B right there, looking back at that too. So, yeah, as always, I do definitely wish PPD the best of luck, and certainly think the potential's there. But that's what I have to say about that, though. So.
I do want to just say one last thing, which is that, me, I'm always talking about like mentality and like what it takes to perform under pressure. And I saw NIP win a BO1. I saw them 2-0 Alliance when they had to 2-0 Alliance to get that spot. True. And get the opportunity to go into the tiebreaker. So that to me speaks pretty highly of them being able to, clutch it when they have to, and a lot of these other teams seem to crumble under pressure. So just wanted to throw that out there. It's something that is important to pay attention to.
That is fair. I do remember watching that Liquid OG series, and Liquid took the first game, and that basically meant, as you're pointing out, that NIP had a 2-0 Alliance, and I went into that series as a Liquid fan. It's been stated before. Pretty confident that Liquid was going to be moving on, but you're right. NIP did take care of business there with the pressure. And then they did win that tiebreaker match. So, yeah, maybe I am underselling them in the end. But, again, we'll see how they do at the major. Still need a little bit more evidence personally. But it does feel like I've always liked Hawk. I will say that, going back to Gambit last season. They were a fun team to follow and watch. A disappointing finish to the end of the season. But he is certainly a great carry player. So, okay.
I'll also just briefly state that just what you're saying, where they have to win a 2-0 and then win a best of one to make it to the playoffs, where 3 teams make it and only 4 teams make it to the playoffs. I think that speaks heavily about the what do you call it? The tumultuousness.
I have no clue what you're trying to say.
Yeah, tumultuousness. The volatility.
Sure. I know
the
that
structure.
word. Yes.
Tumultuous is a word. I just wasn't sure if tumultuousness. I'm googling that after this.
Making a loud,
but the volatility of the structure in place speaks even more heaps and bounds about how one best of 2 can decide what team goes to the major. So, like, to have a team like Alliance and Liquid just make nothing, or to make not the major, I guess. In this case, Alliance made the minor, but it's that just speaks heaps and bounds about it. I don't like the structure right now. I think at least 6 teams, if there's 3 spots, should go to the playoffs. Have the 2 top teams get a bye, and then have the other 4, have to play a like the 2 versus the 3 of each group. I think that's structure. I look at that, and I just sometimes say, what the hell was the person organizing this thinking? Like, 3rd place gets no chance, and 3 out of 4 teams qualify. Like, what the hell is the group stage meant to be that important? I don't think it should be that way. But, that's a whole nother. We've already slightly discussed the.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Format.
It's
so no redundancy past that.
Well, yeah, yeah. Like we have already discussed that, but it is
I'm
just
googling tumultuous.
I hear tumultuous. Yeah, I just had it play on the stream there. Okay, so it is a word, making a loud, confused noise. That's excited, confused, or disorderly, apparently too. So it's a new word for me. Anywho, but yeah, the format certainly needs some changing, especially in these more populated regions that there is more competition. So, but something tells me we may not see that this season. That goes back into the whole discussion about the next season, and well, we already kind of know about that too. But going over the other regions again, I don't want to spend too much time here necessarily. Those were the bigger storylines, certainly, of the rest of the major qualifiers. But at a CIS, you had Navi and VP. Again, a little bit to my surprise, just because the CIS region tends to be a little bit chaotic, as a word I like to use, in terms of the teams that ultimately do qualify and how they do. I was maybe going with Hellraisers, I believe. I went with the Na'Vi, but VP does sneak through once again, and they are going to be representing CIS, so not too much, again, to be said, but give yourselves a chance. Any thoughts on those two teams elevated?
I like Na'Vi. I like the story of Na'Vi. I mean, they got kind of screwed over by Zayats leaving them at the last second. They picked up Sema, who seems to be like this. He's just like the journeyman support player. Throw him in the 5, throw him in the 4. He kind of pulls the team together and does his job in that spot. He's always around the scene. So it does speak to the other 4 players on their team being very high level, just because, losing a 4 player who tends to be the catalyst for action in Dota, at least in like the early stages of the game, is a pretty big deal. And I like that they were able to persevere through that. Not the most difficult group or the most difficult qualifier, I guess, but I think Na'Vi is starting to trend in the right direction. This is like the second major in a row they made.
Yeah.
And they seem to be potentially the best CIS team, at least when it comes to like interregional play.
Yeah, right now so far in the season, sure.
Yeah.
I called those 2 teams out of the 4 making it, so I'll just say no surprise from me here. I just thought that the other 2 teams weren't solid enough. Even though VP isn't amazing, I agree with you that Na'Vi is probably the best team, but I think VP still just got very solid players, and that's hard to overcome in qualifiers. I think like when the other team's individual players are just better than you, I think that's very hard to overcome unless you're a very good team unit, like unless you have a drastic team element that's making up for it. And a lot of these teams are kind of just coming together, they're not exactly 4-year-old teams or something, so just hard to have that trump card when VP's got a bunch of all-stars on their team, even if they're not the best so far.
It every time I look at that VP roster, it kind of reminds myself that that's right. They have Resolution as their offlaner. It's something about that still feels so weird. But what we've been seeing more recently with, of course, Ramsey's success in the offlane, and we've had a couple others come about as well with mid one, most recent, of course, with OG. We talked about that. It seems like that is becoming more and more of a trend. So clearly, again, working out for them enough. Getting to the major, we'll see how they do. But those 2 teams representing CIS. Going to the Southeast Asia region, of course, they're the ones that had the interesting, keep saying the word interesting, but unfortunate, I think it's a better word here in this case, where Adroit had the internet issues. They had to forfeit their initial match against Fnatic, but came back strong in the 3rd place match, and they ended up winning. They got to the LAN center the next day, they played from it, and they made it work. So that's a fun storyline to me, the fact that a team in Adroit persevered, you could say, through dealing with those internet issues and defeating IO Dota 2, which, again, it was a solid roster, certainly. They came from the open qualifiers, but Miracle, Ohio, Bimbo, Ben-Hur, and Mushi, definitely nothing to scoff at there. So congrats to Adroit, though, joining Fnatic and Geek Fam, of course, in the major there. But, any quick thoughts there?
Who? Me?
Oh, Element, sure. I was seeing if that would work.
Okay. Sure. I mean, I think that it's good to see more teams than just like the TNCs and Fanatics being near the top of this region, because it does seem like the SEA region has like an insane amount of talent. They obviously have, I would say, are they like the 3rd most populated server after China and like the European region, I guess. But there's like ridiculous amounts of talent. They're starting to spread out. We've got mid one going to Europe. We've got just like constant high level carry and mid players, it seems like, being drafted into Chinese teams now, like especially the Malaysian guys. And so the region has so much potential. So I'm glad to see a team that has no, former big name players on it really in Adroit making it to the major. And this is, again, like a consistently second good performance for them. Geek Fam looked quite good, making it to the minor last time. And, with Raven on carry, and then several other players, Cuckoo as well, of course, several other players that have been around the scene but never had that much success. It's good to see the rise of more high level teams in SEA. And I did just want to say, like, TNC Predator, I mean, who knows what's going on? It just kind of feels like this team maybe just doesn't care because they're already going to TI.
Yeah, we have discussed it before. Again, I've made the opinion several times that I don't expect the highest of them past that first major they won, and there's a multitude of reasons for that, not to get into too much, but I feel like they're almost at the point where they I don't want to say they should take a break, but they may want to think about that for Cycle 4 just to really refresh going strong into finishing the season, because, yeah, it feels like they have gone downhill, certainly, as the season has gone on here. But, yeah, BSJ, any thoughts on the SEA?
I think tribute to Geek Fam. They've watched the podcast. They've learned the secrets to qualifying to majors. You kick your 1NA player and you got it. So that's secret to success for any team out there. The less NA players you have, the more likely you are to
brutal
to be successful. So, I'll tell you, all things to say, like I've heard a lot of things about the SEA region in terms of toxicity, but not once have I heard about the SEA region like not being good or not trying. And I think in pubs, like that's what it takes for these mid-tier players that aren't quite pro to get better. And that was something I was going to say about the China region. I hear their pubs are great, and even if SEA is incredibly toxic, I've heard that the quality of competition in the pubs is very high. And that's why I think these players out of these regions are promising. And, all you need is a little bit of direction, maybe just one captain. I don't know too much about Adroit. I have watched them, but I don't know too much about the inner dynamics of their players or anything. But I think it's just bound to happen in these regions that, it's eventually like these players are getting very good experience in these pubs. Eventually, they're going to be good enough to overcome the TNCs that are not in peak form. So it's cool to see. I agree that it's very nice to see a little mix up in this region, because it gets a little bit tiring to see the same teams, especially when you express doubt about their skill level. I think you've mentioned once or twice, like you said, that you don't think TNC is all that great.
Yeah, no one likes to see Fnatic and TNC come to a major and then just get bottom 4 like over and over.
I actually don't. That's a whole nother topic, but that is true. I hope for these teams that they don't get bottom 4. Maybe they can pull a Beast Coast where they crack into the top 6 or top 8. That's what I'd love to see from one of these teams. I think that's very good indication for the future for them if they're able to do that.
All right, so Fnatic, Geek Fam, and Adroit, the 3 teams, again, out of Southeast Asia that will be going. That leaves us, which we've already kind of commented on even, the North America region. Very good. No. The top 2 teams, you got Evil Geniuses and Chaos. Again, this kind of played out perhaps even the most expected of any region, and I think that is more telling as far as how BSJ has been so eloquently putting it. This region is not the greatest right now. So, but EG and Chaos going on. You have Business Associates and Fighting Pandas dropping out of the minor qualifiers themselves. And then who did qualify out of the minors? That was Business Associates.
It's all the teams we expected. It's
Pandas,
not complete trash that, got to the minor and the major. It's nice to know in NA at least you have some job security as a tier 2, tier 3 team, because you will make it to a minor or a major because of the slots allotted. The only but the only thing up in the air for me in this qualifier was if it was going to be Business Associates, Chaos, or Fighting Pandas that took the second major spot.
Sure,
and I had Chaos favored, but I did think that was like not 100%, and that showed in the qualifiers. They didn't, in no means did they clean sweep either series. I think Business Associates honestly kind of threw the series against Chaos. At least the first one I saw them play, they lost 2-1, but it felt like both games, or all 3 games, whatever team was winning lost. Like they just threw the game. But it does make entertaining Dota. So, if you like watching pub-esque type Dota that an average viewer can kind of relate to, the NA region is great for that. So
when you get the Grand cast.
Yeah. The Grand cast is great. I thoroughly enjoyed watching these games. The chat's giving a lot of Omega lulls and foreheads, but it's, at the end of the day, I already made my comments. No shockers about it.
No, please tell us again.
Looking forward to EG getting 2nd or 3rd place in the major.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of at this point now where I'm starting to look at the NA region as like the SA region from a couple years ago, where
Yeah,
it's
it
like a
is.
good thing that we have a second slot because otherwise nobody else would get competitive experience in an international LAN environment. And we saw what that did for SA. Like they eventually elevated themselves a bit and have started to be a bit more competitive in the the global scene. That being said, I feel like the players in NA that keep getting these shots have been the players that have been getting this shot for the last like 4 years now. So
Yeah.
it is a little bit disheartening to just see like the same 9 or 10 players just kind of shuffle, come together in a team, consistently perform underneath EG's standard. And I don't really know what there is else to say about NA other than like I guess people need to try a little bit harder.
I mean, like when you're playing top 100 games, I had Arteezy the other day as the enemy safe laner, or maybe he's on my team, I don't remember, but he specifically was like, I play in the Europe region and I'm playing against, two like Enchantress Clockwork offlane. I come to NA and I'm playing against Pudge Pangolier and free farming. It's like the quality of pubs is the reason why the same players keep getting these spots, and I'll harp on that. Like you play 8 NA games, maybe one of them has both teams trying to the bitter end. Maybe one. Like it's pathetic. Yeah. I'm not like, I'm a part of this region, and there's a lot of things I do wrong as a player, but the one thing I don't do is just fucking give up at 10 minutes into the game. And it happens. Like if you watch NA streams at all, it's even promoted. Not going to call anyone out here. It's even promoted by streamers that it's cool. So, it's such a toxic mentality, and it is not some fucking top secret formula of why NA has the same exact players, cycling through on these tier 2, tier 3 teams, getting the same opportunities. And I want us to get a rude wake up call. I want people to I think we've gotten soft. I think we've gotten complacent.
Take away our slot. One
please,
slot for MA, honestly.
What motivate teams like Business Associates and Pandas to actually have to beat each other rather than Zoomies to make it to a minor. So
I think you hit the nail on the head. I never really, I mean, I know I've thought about this before, but since you brought it up, Elevated, the idea that these last 3 to 4 years, especially the cycling of the same players, you compare it to any other region, it does feel like the talent is the most similar to what it was, again, 3 to 4 years ago than what we have now. And one of the only names that can come to mind that maybe really has risen the ranks in just these last couple of years is Quinn, CCNC. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, because he was a number 1 player in the ladder, and notably, of course, you're going to get noticed there. And 2, PPD took the jump. He took the risk of picking him up for his team and trying him out. And PPD is notorious for doing that. And he's one of the few captains, especially out of NA, that is willing to do that, it feels like. So, and now you have, again, PPD himself, he's back in the European region. So, the cycling of the same players, I do think, is one amongst several other issues that you have pointed out, certainly, that it needs to be fixed some way, somehow. And, taking away slots, it does feel like that could be that wake-up call, certainly. It's... Man, BSJ, I remember at the beginning of the season, and I think for good reason, we're sitting here arguing because they got 3 major slots in the first cycle, and we're sitting here like, they deserve this. This feels pretty good. And at the time, it did. It felt appropriate, but as the season has gone on, it's certainly it's funny how things can change, I suppose.
Yeah, I just can't believe that you can play top 100 games and have them be as much of a joke as they are. Like it's actually at this point, because I've started recently taking it seriously again. I was like 7,100 MMR at the start of January, and I decided to very much try. And I'm back to, I was at 8,200 on my main account, and it doesn't matter how high you go. Like, it just doesn't matter. You're at the very top. I'm in a top fucking 50 game. Excuse my language. I was in a top 50 game, and I can't rely on it more than a 25% chance to actually be a real game. Like, it's just a matter of if everyone in the region or everyone in the world's playing 8 to 10 hours a day, and they're getting 8 good pubs and I'm getting 1 or 2, they're gonna be better. And it's not like an excuse for our region. It's like, it's a collective. It is a collective problem that no single player can overcome. And that's why all the players with any amount of promise just leave. Like they they know that if they continue playing here, they're naturally going to fall behind. And, PPD even said, like, NIP as a decision, the reason why, if you weren't there for that, the reason why they went to EU is they're like, even if we qualify for majors and minors from NA, that doesn't make us any better. Like, it doesn't help
we
us.
won't get better as a team.
Yeah, and it's like,
Yep.
at the end of the day, getting last place or bottom 4 at a major gets you like $2,000 each, and if you're not sponsored, like, what does that actually accomplish? Like, it doesn't matter in Dota to be
really
that caliber of a team. You have to achieve more than that to make it worth your while. So the fact that all these captains and players are just jumping ship, it speaks more and more to people are just giving up. And I wonder, at what point is this region just permanently the laughingstock? Like, what if one day EG decided to leave? What if?
Oh my God! Like
what if? Right? Like, at this point, they don't even have any players.
I was gonna say
they have
right.
Arteezy.
They have Arteezy,
but but what if? At that point,
they could play.
You literally have nothing. Like we have chaos because they're mostly NA players, and
I mean, it may take that, honestly. Like, it really is just unbelievable how, and I haven't gotten the opportunity to play like Europe or China or SCA pubs, but I'm tempted almost just to queue on super high ping just to have like the contrast, because like you said, the fact that you have maybe like a 10% chance to actually finish your game with everybody trying the whole time it's like, why are people even queuing for games in NA? Because it's literally like, if you win the laning stage, the other team will give up. If you lose the laning stage, your team will give up. Nobody in North America, other than maybe like the top 20 players in the region, understands how to play the game from behind. And I just don't understand how you can play Dota on like a high level without the concept that sometimes your game is not going to be perfect. Like, what is this? It's a competitive game. People are trying to beat you. Why is there no understanding that sometimes you can't have a perfect game every time? It's not all about you. It's about you doing your job. And if you can't do your job from behind, then you're not a good enough player to make it. Like, it's that simple.
How can you watch OG win 2 TIs where they're behind in the laning stage 90% of games and they are winning TIs 2 in a row? Like, that for me is enough to be like, what more proof of concept do you need that the hardest thing in Dota is to know how to play a game that takes some serious thinking, like to actually figure out a way back into the game. The games that shock me the most in NA are the ones where I'm like, wait a minute, we're losing and my team is running at them trying to kill them. Like, actually, like, what? Like, most of the time people just farm their way to a loss. They're like, I'm fucking done. My safe laner sucks. When he's against Enchantress +1, when that's like a nightmare. And it's like, yeah, they lost their safe lane. What do you expect? When I play Enchantress, I win the off lane 95% of the time. Like, what do you expect that your safe laner to have happen to them? Like, that's the meta right now. And then like last patch when it was, easier to play off lane, but then you lost your off lane in a matchup that was clearly bad. People are just like, oh, my off lane lost, like, GG, I don't want to play anymore. And it's like, I mean, trust me, I know Brady's heard me talk about this, and you're standing in for us, but it is a problem that is subject to our culture, and it's just sad. And I hope the league system next year somehow promotes inter-regional play and requires you to actually compete with other regions in some way to really put NA in their place, man. Because like, the minute you branch out of NA, like any high-level pub player, I'm not going to name names, if they go to other regions, they get laughed at, like when they are playing and people are like, wow, you're so freaking bad. Like, what? And like that just, I hate to be a part of it. It's kind of like but it's like, I don't have a choice unless I were to move. And viewers ask me that, and part of me is almost considering, at what point do I willingly try to move somewhere just for a few months or something and give it a try? Because I've tried it EU pubs, and my problem was that against really good players, I'm on 100 ping and they're on 10. Right. I just can't win the lane. I'm just going to lose favorable matchups, and albeit, like, at what point though is that a better option? And I think players like Gunner are saying, and Snake King, I've seen those two specifically play a lot of EU. They're just like, I don't care. Like, I'd rather get, better practice in a game where I know I'm not playing to my full potential than it is to have good ping. Because go ahead.
Just kind of a side thing from that. One of the best players in Han, not to go too off topic here, but he was from Australia. He constantly played with 250 plus MS just because he had to. But he was one of the best players ever. His name was Slicks, and it was one of those situations where when he did end up qualifying for LAN, you could just tell the boost that you saw from that, like the fact that he's able to react instantly, and it was something to watch. But yeah, it's one of those, if you kind of just train yourself to deal with that latency, then it is doable. It's not ideal, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more players take that approach, like you're saying with Gunnar and Snaking specifically.
I mean, what it ends up being is that there's just some things that are unovercomable. Like if me and a guy are both pump faking for a CS and he has 10 ping and I have 70, he's going to get it 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of thing that is what I just got done playing in New York on 15 ping for a month, and it's day and night between anywhere between 70 to 110. Like, it is day and night. And, but like, I just emphasize, it at what point, you just have to you have to tank something, it either has to be bad ping or bad games. And a lot of these players are just like, okay, I'll accept the fact that, like you said, you can adjust in a lot of ways. I'll just accept that I lose 5 CS every laning stage because I'm playing in EU rather than NA. And if anything, maybe you'll be better because you're learning to play with weaker starts. But at the same time, like I also, there's so many factors to that. But, I've been suffering it with myself because my viewers were just like, you should just queue EU when you're in New York. And I'm like, but I have 10 ping or 100, it's tough. But then I go to EU, and as long as if I was playing support, I thoroughly enjoyed those games because as support, you don't feel a ping nearly as much just, because you're only harassing or maybe pulling rather than exact precise CSing and stuff. It's more conceptual, obviously, rotating around the map and stuff.
Right, and you make a mistake, and people don't quit the game. Like,
oh, absolutely.
That's the biggest thing. Right? Like,
you tell your team to smoke with you, and you actually get, people smoking with you.
It's okay to play Dota correctly in other regions, whereas in NA, it's just like, all right, somebody misses a CS, and their support just decides to jungle from then on. And that happens literally from Herald through Immortal. Like, how is that the entire culture of a region where it doesn't matter what level you can't escape this ridiculously awful gameplay?
Yes, you can. You go to EU. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I know. Just I can sympathize with Breaky right now because I know he's heard me talk about this a lot. So
I want to thank you guys for tuning into the NA Pub podcast here. That's what we're here. No, it's a good discussion. It really is, and that's why I've been fine letting it go on here. But at the same time, we are running a little bit long here, so I do want to continue just a couple other things that we wanted to go over. But certainly,
sorry, can I say one last thing?
Sure.
Go ahead.
It's just gonna be fun because we finally have an NA LAN.
Yeah.
So everybody's gonna come play.
Oh,
for like 2 weeks.
I'm wondering if it's gonna be on US West, by the way. I hope it is. Boom, 40 ping.
It's gonna be super cool to watch because you're gonna see all these EU and all these Chinese and all these SEA players come here, and they're gonna dominate the games against the regulars of NA.
They're gonna play with Lukey, and they're gonna be like,
"Who's
this
Pango
guy's
spammer?"
7?
Yeah, it's those are fun times with the majors, and that is a unique experience because it doesn't happen often. So
I can't wait. That was my favorite part about the Seattle TIs and the Vancouver TI was the fact that I got to play 2 weeks or so of just top tier freaking pubs.
So. Okay, so yeah, a couple other things to go over here before we do start wrapping up actually, but we'll start with the minor qualifier, specifically the European region. As we've already kind of mentioned before, but a couple of takeaways from this. Alliance, the team to represent Europe, they had to defeat Nigma 3-2 in the best-of-5 grand finals to ultimately qualify and secure that spot. So no surprises here that it was an epic grand finals. Obviously, it was a very well-fought playoffs itself, with Liquid and Aggressive Mode being the other two teams involved. But again, in the end, Alliance going to the minor, Nigma ultimately not qualifying, and again, this a case here of a team Enigma that sat out the first cycle, at least qualified last cycle, but now having to sit out again in a sense. So again, quickly here, but thoughts on Alliance ultimately beating Nigma, and more so, what does this mean for Nigma moving forward as a team? Should they be concerned, I suppose? Elevated?
Yeah, I think that Nigma should be concerned just because they didn't look good. Like they seem to be just off in terms of their coordination. They were overextending. Their communication just seems like really poor compared to what it used to be. And Alliance continues to prove that they are a team that was kind of thrown together seemingly at the beginning of the year that is exceeding expectations in terms of what I think most people would have predicted. So I would say that they're probably the heavy favorites to win the minor. I look at the other 7 teams and I'm just like, all right, well, EU does get that extra spot after all.
That's fair. BSJ?
I for me, they've been proving constantly throughout this season that even though they like won the minor and went to the major, that there is lack of cohesiveness, and they really have been carried by the individual skill of their players. And I just same thing as earlier. There could be so many reasons behind that, but I would say give them one more cycle, and then if something similar happens, I would be drastically concerned. But by no means can you ignore the potential implications of what is happening right now. This is kind of like the symptoms warning sign scenario. Address the problem. If it doesn't get addressed now, it might be a drastic situation that needs to happen. But it's kind of similar to like PPD. It's like, I think Kuro's just top tier captain, and whether it's removing players or whatever has to be done, it will be figured out at some point. With PPD, it took kicking 3 players, and I'm not saying that's what Nigma has to do, but I just think I think captains like that are so rare that it's inevitable that whatever team they end up directing will make it back to the top at some point.
Yeah, it's worth noting again, they got knocked down by Liquid in the first round of the minor, and they had to go to the lower bracket to ultimately get that grand final spot to even give themselves a chance, which, again, they made it an epic series, sure, but in the end, Alliance, the team out of Europe to qualify. So for me personally, I don't think we're hitting the red alert button just yet. This is the European region after all. It's very, very difficult. We knew that going in. So one of these teams we were going to be surprised about to an extent, them and Liquid being the other one. Both, of course, major teams last cycle, not qualifying even for the minor. This isn't like an LGD situation, though, right? It's certainly more understandable than something like that. So I think they're fine, but yeah, well, it's something certainly to monitor as we progress on here, as we got 2 more cycles still for them to play with.
How much of it do you think is patch related, BSJ? Because I feel like this patch is almost like 2 years ago in terms of how the game's being played. It's been a long time since we've had a meta that's kind of like this.
I mean, what's confusing for me is I think Team Nigma individual players are at similar caliber to like Secret, for instance, and a team like Secret just crushes every single patch. So it's like, I don't. If it's a team like TNC in question, I'll call out the patch. I will say that could be a drastic influence on their level of success. But with a team like Team Nigma, you're past the skill level of worrying about how good a patch is for you. That's my opinion. They're better players than a patch dictating how good they are at Dota. So I just won't give them that as a reason to even remotely be not at their top form. There's something else wrong. That will not be the problem.
You always, when you do start to see a little bit of struggle with a team like this in their shoes, you do have to bring up the drive question of, this is a team that's had major success, of course, winning a TI for the 5 players, getting to the finals just this previous season. Even we himself has been to a couple, and we saw the true side. Yes, it hurt, and that's understandable, but they've had a lot of great success these last 2 to 3 years. So it is difficult in any competition, any traditional sport, esport, or whatever, to keep that drive going. Only those unique people in their respective sports seem to be able to do that. And I'm not saying that's a situation here, but that certainly is something to at least be a thought when you do see a team start to struggle. But again, personally, I don't think they're at that spot even yet. I don't think, like I said, don't go red alert. Things are fine. Let's just let the season ultimately play out. They don't scream to me a team that needs to be looking to make changes.
For sure.
Okay, the other qualifiers. Let's just I'll just go over the teams that qualified. If you guys want to give any takes quickly on said teams, yeah, Gambit and Forz Esports out of CIS. They spell esports with a capital S. I hate them already. Business Associates and Fighting Pandas out of North America. Alliance out of Europe, as mentioned. Boom Esports out of Southeast Asia, and No Ping Esports out of South America. China is actually starting in an hour from now, and they've been delayed, but we'll find out the China qualifier by the time the next podcast rolls around. But yeah, in a couple of days from here, as we're doing this live recording. Worth noting, again, this brings up the point too that TNC did not qualify out of Southeast Asia even for the minor. That's certainly one of the more standout results that we do have right here. So, Elevated, any analysis on these teams?
Not much, honestly. It seems pretty standard throughout. Like, CIS is kind of a mess once you get below the top 3 or 4 teams. Gambit is like in those top 3 teams usually. Of course, we've got our 2 NA superstar rosters who basically just have a free trip to the minor. And then the other regions, no ping. It's like this could either be, like an Infamous, it could be some random other stack of Peruvian or Brazilian players. It's just like the same players over and over thrown together in another stack. And TNC, what is there to be said? Like they don't look very good, so another SEA team gets a shot, and that's cool.
I mean, what I look forward to always in the minors is we get the nice quality team that didn't make it in the China or European major slot. So we get those teams, and they're always the favorites. And yet to be upset, both or all the minor winners so far have been from the China or European region. So it's just a matter of kind of having these teams get to prove themselves. And at the end of the day, it's mainly I look at it as practice for these players. Like they get to play against better competition. And, obviously I, for the most part, look at the minor as, is it the Chinese team or is it the European team that's going to make it to the major? Everyone else kind of see, get their feet in the water and get some good LAN experience. And sadly, that is kind of what it is. Maybe that'll change if, they change the slot allocation, but I don't really care about that as of right now going into it. I just look forward to seeing the potential of some of these other teams. I think every minor, there's been like 1 or 2 teams that kind of step it up. Totally. They make it to top 3 or 4, and you're like, oh, like these guys gave Team Nigma a run for their money. And then there's the teams that, you kind of just laugh at them. You're like, oh, this is like clearly tier 3, tier 4 Dota. So it's like a lot of homework kind of compacted into one small tournament. And I got to cast the last one, and it's funny to watch the meta that develops in a minor, just because when nobody's tier 1, it more so boils down to who's better at their strategy rather than whose strategy is best. Kind of like at the highest level, since everyone's really, really good, it comes down to what team happened to find the optimal strategy in that specific meta. But
your minor too was like right after the big patch that took place. So
exactly. Yeah. So it just felt like, who was better at their specific strategy ended up taking it. And so you get to see some like real weird heroes sometimes and specialties. And I like that aspect. So I personally enjoy watching the minor for that. And that's what I'm always looking out for. So I don't think I've ever really given my perspective on minors, but that's why I enjoy it. So if you're a viewer at home thinking about watching the minor, that's the reason I would watch it, and definitely can look out for that.
Yeah, Starladder putting on the production, always a pretty solid production themselves out of Kiev there, of course, and the minor itself, March 5th through the 8th is when it's set to happen. So again, coming up fairly quickly, 2 to 3 weeks here, we'll be into that minor. So, yeah, those are the minor results as well. One more thing before we do, again, officially wrap up here, but worth noting, third-party tournaments still taking place, and WePlay is doing their part, not only hosting the recent minor, but now hosting what they call the Tug of War Mad Moon tournament. It's been technically it's from a series of events that they've been running over time, but point is, it's an 8-team LAN that's taking place. A couple of cool things from it. We get to see Baited, which is the new Dendy squad that his team that he put together. So we'll see how they perform. But you do have teams like Team Secret, NIP, Virtus Pro, so several major qualified teams that will get a little bit more practice before said major, and I suppose a couple of minor teams as well on top of that. But yeah, any thoughts from you guys? Elevate, we'll start with you on this event.
I'm just kind of excited to see how some of these teams, like Team Nigma again, they're not in the cycle. Are they going to play this one super seriously? Are they going to be trying stuff out? Are they going to be trying to refine and figure out their issues? Is Secret going to play it seriously? Are they just going to be like wildly experimenting with stuff? NIP, I feel like will probably be doing pretty solid reps because they are such a newly formed team. And then you've got these other sort of like lesser experienced or lesser tier teams that might be looking to prove something or like get some momentum going into the next cycle, like Bait or Gambit or Infamous or Aggressive Mode, who like could potentially, maybe beat a Secret who's trying to run some techie strategy or whatever, and then be like, hey, we beat Secret, and now they suddenly have extra confidence going into the next round.
Yeah, this kind of tournament just gives me like Summit vibes, where it's a specific region that's kind of doing like something I think will grow the region more so than anything. Yeah, they always have teams from other regions, but to me, this tournament just stands out as a fan service. Is that what it's called, right? Fan service.
Sure. Yeah.
To the CIS region with the Dindy team, like giving them a chance to potentially prove themselves. I'm always very skeptical. It's not that I view Dindy lowly or anything, but like I don't think anything you did in TI 1 through 4 remotely results in success nowadays. Like, yeah, there are players that are obviously very successful now that were successful early on in Dota, but there's also plenty that are not. But I think Dendy's like a really important icon for the community, and I can hope that tournaments like this almost become more popular as time goes on, where these very high profile players that aren't necessarily at the top of their game anymore, at least haven't proven they are, can draw some fan service to the game. Like, I think that these types of tournaments are nice, and not every tournament has to be, or I would hope that not every tournament has to be absolute tier 1 Dota to attract a large audience. And I'm hoping that a tournament like this does attract a large audience. And that's what I'm looking for in this tournament, is how big of a success more so favored to the popularity of the players rather than the quality of the teams. And I think it's important that that's like for the longevity of an esport that exists. So kind of that's what I'm looking for.
It's okay to entertain. It doesn't always have to be like super
yeah.
competitive all the time. It is a game after all. It's for entertainment that we watch. I do like the fact that they're doing this like MVP with cash prizes for that as well. I think that's kind of an interesting innovation on the MVP, which most people just kind of meme, and they probably will with this one too. But at the same time, there's like a little bit more. People might take it a little bit more seriously because there is $10,000 that you're going to give to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It's for the best core and the best support. That's something else that is unique with this event. It's not really a bounty, I guess, but yeah, for the award. I mean, we've seen it at a couple, obviously, the ESL events. They do have the car that they even give to the quote-unquote MVP, but yeah, it's fun to see unique stuff like that. And I go back to, I mean, we play the one putting this on. They always are top-notch production, and it seems like, especially for being so new still, they've only been in a couple of years at the most. Really, this last year is when they started to explode as far as Dota 2 goes. They're willing to be unique, and it goes back to the points you both are bringing up, that these third-party tournaments, they know that in the end they really should be about having fun and bringing that fan service there. And hey, it starts on Wednesday, and so it's a $300,000 tournament with 8 solid teams, including some of the best in the world in Team Secret, etc. Why not? We get some good Dota to watch before the minor, and then eventually the next major that takes place. So definitely props to WePlay for putting this on.
Yeah, I just wish the success for these types of tournaments. That's all. Like, I think WePlay's production hopefully proved after the minor that people can maybe watch a tournament like this just for the sake of how good the production was. I think that is important. And I think that the WePlay minor, for instance, was obviously had some big name teams like Team Nigma. So it did get more viewers because of that, but it also had really good production, and people constantly were talking about that. And I want for that to be worth it. I want for that to be us to be in a scene where that's, an organization can validate putting that much money and effort into the production because it actually matters. And like I said, this type of tournament I think is important to be successful for the longevity of the scene, and not just have it be the highest competition of majors. NBA has an all-star game, that type of stuff. Why can't Dota have these type of events? And I feel like they've kind of died off over the years as the games become much more try hard and everything. Obviously makes sense because there's so much money in it, but I think it's important that we still do these. So I'm just highly emphasizing, I'm rooting for the success of a tournament like this. And as you said, everyone likes to watch some high quality Dota, and there are some good teams here. So I'm looking forward to just some good entertainment.
All right. Again, that starts on Wednesday. Goes through the weekend. $300,000 prize pool. We get some good Dota by the time our next podcast show runs around next week. And we get something good to talk about there as well. So, but I think that's a good point to start wrapping up officially. So, give you guys a chance. So first up, Elevated, thank you so much for joining us. By the way, Alchemy Elevated is your Twitter, and there's a reason for that. If you want to give a brief explanation what you do over there at Dota Alchemy.
I do everything, including Jenkins's laundry and, scheduling all of his meetings. I'm basically a secretary, a manager, a handler, a fluffer, whatever else he needs. Exactly. But yeah, I run Dota Alchemy, the YouTube channel. I was blessed with having BSJ help me make some content when Jenkins was playing D&D. So thank you for stepping in and stepping up. And we'd love to have you guys on our content anytime you want. We just like to make entertaining and educational Dota content. So thank you for having me on here as well. I appreciate it.
Definitely. Check it out, guys, on YouTube, Dota Alchemy. Great community as well. They got an awesome Discord server, so feel free to hit it up. BSJ, any last words yourself?
I talked plenty, especially today. So thanks for having me again. It was fun. Always enjoy this.
All right, officially wrapping up, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, feel free to hit that follow button if you like this show. It lets you know when we are going to be live. Again, the idea that every Monday at our new time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, is what we're going for right now. But also subscriptions. In fact, I saw one earlier throwing out a sub there. It does help support not only our podcast, but the umbrella of podcasts under Prediction Esports. So really do appreciate it, guys. And look forward to next week already. So have a good night. We'll see you next time. Until then.